सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Like God, the Caliph saw all. Through the eyes of a Tartar teacher, a dervish from Kashgar, a beggar from India, actors, jugglers, illusionists, and tens of thousands of other secret agents, the Ottoman Sultan Abdul Hamid II surveilled every inch of his kingdom. From the back streets of Istanbul came reports of intrigues against the throne. From outer Bulgaria, warnings of plots to dynamite the emperor at his prayers. Every single report was read by the emperor himself and then handed to officers after excising the names of the agents. The emperor encouraged even his most trusted ministers to spy on each other. They all liken one another to a minaret. On the outside it looks straight, but inside it is actually crooked. The contemporary Egyptian journalist Ibrahim al-Muwaylihi recorded, "The mouth may smile," he wrote, "but the heart is full of vengeance." Last week, a Supreme Court appointed committee led by Justice R.V. Ravindran recommended legal reforms to ensure India doesn't degenerate into the kind of paranoid dystopia built by the Sultan. Although the report has not yet been made public, the court has said Justice Ravindran has sought a law to regulate electronic surveillance by India's intelligence services with measures to protect the privacy rights of citizens. Even though the committee hasn't been able to determine if the Indian government planted malware on the phones of activists, journalists, and political leaders, nor if Israel-made Pegasus software was used, this is not the important issue. For generations, governments have pushed intelligence services to engage in espionage against political adversaries using tools meant to uncover national security threats. The practice has had deep costs for Indian democracy and time's running out for change. As Abdul Hamid II and dozens of other authoritarian rulers learned, a surveillance state isn't the same thing as a secure one. Involvement in domestic political espionage was hardwired into India's intelligence services under British colonial rule. Frederick Hamilton Temple Blackwood, Viceroy of India from 1884 to 1888, laid the foundations for the Intelligence Bureau, ordering the creation of a central organization for the collection of intelligence on political, social, and religious movements. In 1920, this became the Intelligence Bureau, which had a primary focus on gathering political information from across British India. Faced with the intensification of nationalist terrorism early in the last century, the Central Intelligence Organization acquired growing influence over decision-making. Although the Intelligence Bureau was much smaller than Sultan Hamid II's massive Yildiz network, as it was called, which was also born in the 1880s, its power raised concerns even within the imperial government. Edwin Montagu, then Secretary of State, warned in 1918 that the Central Intelligence Service was being used, and I quote, not merely as a great detective agency, but as an instrument of government. He worried that its activities are too widespread, that it is growing too rapidly, that it is convenient but dangerous to govern by means of your police. After independence, the Indian government's dependence on the Intelligence Bureau only grew. In 1963, the Intelligence Bureau instructed the Gujarat Police to mount surveillance on leaders of the opposition Swatantra Party and right-wing elements in the Congress Party itself. Faced with concerns voiced by Chief Minister Balwantrai Mehta, the Union Home Ministry insisted such surveillance had to be maintained on those who, I quote, habitually oppose the policies of the government. In 1978, the Justice J.C. Shah Commission, which investigated unlawful intelligence operations during the emergency, reprimanded the Intelligence Bureau for mounting surveillance against politicians such as Babu Jagjeevan Ram. The Commission, however, did not insist on a legal framework for the Intelligence Bureau's operations, recommending instead that a committee of eminent citizens be appointed to monitor its functioning. For all practical purposes, the intelligence services acted as instruments of the Prime Minister, with no legal framework for their operations, nor a process to ensure accountability. Like India, democracies around the world have struggled with the misuse of intelligence services for political ends like this. Through the 1960s, it is now known, the United States National Security Agency and Federal Bureau of Investigation surveilled the civil rights movement, targeting people like Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and even the actress Jane Fonda. A congressional investigation warned that these practices posed risks to democratic institutions and the rights of ordinary citizens. France saw similar scandals involving the misuse of its domestic intelligence service against opposition parties. The UK's MI5 has been revealed to have spied on Trotskyite opposition groups and that country's police forces even on militant environmental movements. The European Parliament is now conducting hearings on credible allegations that Pegasus was used to spy on opposition leaders in Spain, Poland, and Hungary. Even though it is no secret that nation states spy on each other, a European Parliament investigation revealed the US-led Echelon system was eavesdropping on every bit of global electronic communication decades ago. Most democracies protect their own citizens against surveillance by their intelligence services. The UK's safeguard systems centers around an independent review tribunal, while France, Germany, and the United States require judicial authorization before surveillance can take place. India, though, is an outlier among major democracies. The Information Technology Act gives power to intercept digital communications to the Union Home Secretary and the Home Secretaries of the states and union territories. In emergencies, for example, an ongoing counter-terrorism operation, an Inspector General of Police or a Joint Secretary to the government may issue orders directly. The government basically decides then, when circumstances justify electronic surveillance, how long it should be maintained, and if there should be judicial disclosure. Put simply, the government is the judge of its own cause. Lack of cooperation from Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government, which is placed on record by Chief Justice N.V. Ramana himself, as well as the absence of a proper criminal investigation, make it hard to establish exactly which agencies deployed malware against journalists and opposition leaders. Evidence is mounting, though, that such abuse is endemic. In the 2018 Bhima Koregaon case, charges surfaced that malware was used to plant evidence on suspects. Faced with calls for greater legal and parliamentary oversight on intelligence operations, Indian leaders have argued that the multiple threats our country faces, ranging from terrorism to religious chauvinism, justify sweeping surveillance powers. The evidence of history, though, makes this claim specious. Laid end to end, the files of the German Democratic Republic's Ministry for State Security, popularly known as the Stasi, ran for 111 kilometers, documenting in intimate detail the lives of some 5.6 million people. In 1989, the Stasi had more than 91,000 staff and at least 173,000 paid informants. That's 2 for every 100 East German citizens. That very year, though, the regime disintegrated. And Sultan Abdul Hamid II? Well, he was ejected from office by the radical Young Turk movement, which included Turkey's founding leader, Mustafa Kemal. The king's spies didn't warn him about the resentment his actions had engendered. There's no shortage of similar examples from history. The surveillance regime set up by Joseph Stalin, with its show trials and savagery, served only to fuel fear and resentment that culminated in the destruction of the Soviet Union. Citizens competed to denounce each other to the state, the scholar Sheila Fitzpatrick has shown, undoing social cohesion and trust. For scholars, the inability of surveillance states to ensure their own stability isn't a surprise. Andreas Lichter, Max Loeffler, and Sebastian Sieglock found, I quote, the density of informers undermined trust and led to a withdrawal from society. In particular, they noted, more intense surveillance caused lower trust in strangers, stronger negative reciprocity, fewer close friends, lower sociability, and reduced societal engagement. All of that adds up to a society which just doesn't work. The scholars also noted negative and persistent effects of government surveillance on various measures of economic performance. Everybody began to report on each other. Expert Ekrem Ekenci has written of Abdul Hamid II's Turkey. Absurd rumors and slander began to be reported. Even a performance of the Greek classical tragedist Euripides drama in Torres, the historian Mary Errol has recorded, was deemed seditious because of its genesis in Turkey's national rival, Greece. The agents of the Imperial Secret Service soon learned that the greatest rewards, gold, state office, concubines, were to be earned by making up reports that directly concerned the Sultan himself. There was no penalty for fabricating threats. If we are to punish spies for telling lies, the dictum went, then we sacrifice the truth as well. For too long, India's intelligence services have profited from the same perverse logic, entrenching a national security system primarily directed at securing political patronage rather than the security of the state. I'm Praveen Swami and a national security editor of ThePrint.